Australian organisations seem to be on the whole quite reluctant to outsource offshore non-technology processes compared to the global trends that we're seeing elsewhere. What factors, in your opinion, are likely to lead Australian corporations to accelerate offshoring and outsourcing? And is it not really just an opportunity for large FSI companies?
It's a good question. I think that, first of all, Australian companies have, compared to other parts of the world, been more reluctant to offshore. I think there's a couple of factors. Maybe it's because Australia, of its geographic location, and it's maybe a little bit of isolation in that it's not as connected into Europe and so on. I think in terms of what will accelerate it, really at this point in time, I think it will come down to cost drivers. The challenge will be, I think, for a lot of organisations, are they willing to take on the public kind of challenge of selling that it's good for the company to move jobs offshore? And that creates a lot of angst, obviously, in shareholders and the market in general. I think it really comes down to, one, the cost driver, but I would say that there's a lot of money on the table within existing shared service centres in Australia that I would caution Australian organisations, look there first, particularly if you're going to outsource it as part of offshoring. I think there's plenty to do before or in conjunction with labour arbitrage. And I think a cold hard look at that will actually show opportunities and drive when to do it.
That was a comment that you made during this morning's session about money being left on the table, as it were. I know a lot of people will be looking to find that money if you think it's there.
Yeah.
What initial first steps can you advise to shared service organisations operating here who think that might be the case for them? Where would they begin looking and what would be their next steps?
I think the first stage is always looking at, and I know it has kind of emotional connotations for some organisations, is compare yourself to somewhere. How do you know how much money is on the table, or if any money is on the table unless you compare? Now we can get into a whole debate about benchmarking, but let me give you an example. I've got a client I've been working with over the last 18 months or so. And what they did was they actually got the CFO or ex-CFO of one of the competitors to come in and review the costs within finance across the whole organisation. What that showed was that approximately they had a cost base within finance and admin of more than 30% of where they should have been. That was a call to arms. When you've got that kind of direct comparison, it really opens it up. How have they gone about doing that? They've driven down at a very detailed level, looking at what's in shared services, what's outside shared services. What they found is a lot of tailoring to the customers of shared services, and they've been on a path to drive that kind of inefficiency out. They've been looking to, in other words, further standardisation. They've also moved down much more of an automation path, looking at some of the new tools like iReceivables. And so far, and it's been process by process, they've actually been able to achieve somewhere between 20 and 30% in some of the end-to-end processes over the last 18 months. That's the kind of money on the table stuff I'm talking about. Pretty heavy lifting kind of stuff, but there's real money there, even before you think about outsourcing stuff.
And just lastly, Donald, I'd like your view on the Australian market in comparison to perhaps the rest of Asia Pacific or even the rest of the world in terms of the BPO and shared services space. You've operated in this country for a long time now, and you have many different views that you can compare it to from your experiences elsewhere in the world. What would be the major differentiators as you see them?
I think firstly, it's pretty obvious, is scale. Outside the major financial institutions and some of the truly global organisations Australia has, like maybe BHP, you quite quickly get down to organisations that maybe only have several hundred people. Now that's still opportunity in terms of what you can do in driving cost, but compared to, say, the large multinationals, you're in a very different kind of cost-benefit kind of equation there. So the scale element is one. I think the second one is, and it goes back to an earlier comment, I think in terms of the interaction and the willingness to perhaps sort of think about offshoring and where it plays, there's perhaps at times maybe a little less maturity in this market, partly for emotional factors, I think. I think that will change over time. I think outsourcing, to me, has a definite role in any strategy. But when you might outsource might be 5, 7, 8 years, 10 years down a kind of whole path of back office improvement. And for a lot of Australian organisations, going back to my previous answer, they've still got a lot of stuff to do before even moving down to an offshoring and outsourcing route. Having said that, I do think some of the more progressive companies right now, when they look at the competition, are starting to think about it quite seriously and looking at the opportunities as a game changer maybe over the next couple of years from a cost base.